Now, where you going?
School.
Why?
To get educated.
Why?
So I can go to college.
And why is that important?
To get respect.
Respect. Now, who's the bad guys?
Guys who sell drugs.
The guys who have guns.
And who's the good guys?
We're the good guys.
Who's gonna help you?
Nobody.
So who's gonna help?
We're going to help ourselves.
And who do we not want to help us?
White people.
That's right.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling. You take him for a
Malcolm X and the liberal betrayal. Why he would reject today's woke politics, Dr. Ray Taylor. PhD Malcolm X remains one of the most misunderstood figures in American history. His speeches, writings, and evolving ideology provide a deep critique of white liberalism and its role in maintaining systemic oppression under the guise of allyship. This article explores Malcolm X's explicit denunciations of white liberals, his belief that they were more dangerous than overt racists, and how his ideology sharply contrasts with modern woke politics. While contemporary progressives often attempt to co-opt his legacy, Malcolm X would likely have rejected much of today's liberal activism, which he would see as performative and counterproductive. Malcolm X was a radical thinker whose views evolved significantly over his lifetime. However, one consistent theme throughout his speeches was his distrust of white liberals, whom he saw as insincere allies who ultimately maintained the status quo. Unlike the mainstream civil rights movement, which saw integration, Malcolm X initially advocated for Black self-determination, rejecting white liberal paternalism. His critiques of white liberals remain relevant today and challenge the legitimacy of modern woke activism, which he would likely have viewed as another form of white liberal manipulation. Malcolm X's critique of white liberals throughout his speeches, Malcolm X repeatedly expressed disdain for white liberals, whom he saw as hypocritical and deceptive. In his 1963 speech, Message to the Grassroots, he famously compared the white liberal to the fox and the conservative to the wolf.
Being a friend, I think, are two different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
I would agree that no doubt there have been a large number of whites who have posed as liberals and as friends of the Negro and who have time and again betrayed the Negro. On the other hand, I think one could point to a large number of whites who have struggled for civil rights, for equality, and have got little or nothing out of it, other than quite a few bruises.
Give me an example.
Well, the large number of white students who have gone into the South, for example, working for SNCC and other organizations.
Not working for SNCC or other organizations, but working for the white political machines who benefit by the voting efforts of Negroes.
Okay. I'll be more specific. I would cite Herbert Hill, for example, as a kind of person who has championed Negro job rights, for example, in New York City and elsewhere. He has fought the political machine.
First time I met Herbert Hill personally was when they were picketing to stop the working on the Harlem Hospital in Harlem. Negroes for 10 years had to fight the city to get an annex built on the Harlem Hospital. Because in Harlem, we need a hospital more so than anything else. Our people are sick. Plus, we do a lot of cutting and shooting of each other, though we profess to be nonviolent. And Herbert Hill brought his forces out and stopped the working on that site. This is the first time I ever saw him. Then, when work was brought to a halt on a hospital in Harlem, the same Negroes tried to stop the work at the Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, which is predominantly white. They were out there for 3 months during the summer. Couldn't stop anything. And I never saw Herbert Hill out there one time. Now, whenever it takes a stoppage of something that's going to affect the white man, you find the white liberal absent. But when it involves something that primarily will affect the best interests of black people and black people only, then that white liberal is present. Herbert Hill is the labor secretary for the NAACP. Mm-hmm. And if he was interested in black people, he would prepare a black man with the type of knowledge and understanding of the labor troubles involving black people that would enable a black man to sit in the same position as Secretary of Labor or Labor Secretary in the NAACP. I'm suspicious of whites who join Negroes and always have to be in the lead, who always have to be the head, who always have to be at the top in Negro organizations. Those whites who really have the interest of blacks at heart, let them give some advice to some Negroes and stand on the sideline. But don't join the organization and then get at the head of it and pose as a friend of Negroes.
Well, I would defend his sincerity and his commitment. And more than that, I would say that just because a person is a Negro or a black American does not mean that he's going to struggle for Negro rights or for jobs for Negroes or anything else. I think that today you could point to a large number of Negro leaders who have consistently betrayed Negroes in a whole host of areas.
They aren't really Negro leaders. These are puppets that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. These are parrots that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. You can't name me a Negro leader who has betrayed Negroes, who has not been endorsed, sanctioned, subsidized, and supported by the white liberals.
Minister Malcolm, I'd like to...
Well, I could cite one example would be Congressman Dawson, for example, in Chicago.
The conservative openly expressed hostility toward black people, while the liberal pretended to be an ally but ultimately had the same goals of subjugation. Malcolm X saw this as more dangerous because it created a false sense of progress and security among black Americans. In another speech, he stated, "The white liberal is the worst enemy to America and the worst enemy to the black man." He criticized the Democratic Party's use of black voters, arguing that they only courted black support to gain political power while doing little to address real systemic issues. His words resonate today, as the Democratic Party continues to promise reform while failing to address the root causes of economic and racial disparities. The co-opting of Malcolm X's legacy by woke activists in contemporary discourse. Many self-described progressives and woke activists invoke Malcolm X's name to support causes like diversity initiatives, critical race theory, and intersectionality. However, this is a distortion of his philosophy. Malcolm X was not interested in symbolic gestures or performative activism. He was a staunch advocate for black self-reliance and empowerment, a concept that directly conflicts with much of modern leftist activism, which often prioritizes victimhood narratives and state dependency. Malcolm X rejected the idea of seeking white validation or waiting for white people to give black Americans their rights. He encouraged economic independence, self-defense, and self-determination. The modern woke movement, on the other hand, often relies on government intervention, corporate virtue signaling, and cancel culture, tactics Malcolm X would have likely found patronizing and ineffective. Malcolm X on individual responsibility versus victimhood culture. A fundamental difference between Malcolm X's philosophy and modern woke ideology is the emphasis on personal responsibility. He criticized black leaders who encouraged dependency on white liberals, calling instead for an independent black economy, education system, and political movement. In contrast, woke politics often promotes grievance-based identity politics that emphasize oppression over self-determination. Malcolm X would have found this counterproductive, as it disempowers individuals by making them reliant on external forces for change. Would Malcolm X support the modern left? It is highly unlikely that Malcolm X would have aligned with today's leftist politics. He was a nationalist who believed in strong black leadership, not in racial tokenism or policies that kept black people politically and economically subservient. The progressive movement's emphasis on state solutions and racial equity measures that reinforce dependence contradicts Malcolm X's belief in self-sufficiency. Moreover, Malcolm X would have likely rejected much of today's progressive social agenda. While he evolved in his views later in life and sought alliances with global revolutionary movements, his core values, discipline, responsibility, self-reliance, do not align with the ideological tenets of contemporary leftism, which often embraces victimhood culture, identity politics, and cancel culture. Malcolm X's legacy has been distorted by those who seek to fit him into modern political paradigms. He was neither a Democrat nor a liberal, and his views were far removed from today's woke ideology. His harsh critique of white liberalism, emphasis on black self-reliance, and rejection of victimhood culture make it clear that he would not support the modern left's approach to racial and social issues. If anything, his words serve as a warning against the dangers of performative allyship and liberal paternalism. Malcolm X's message remains a powerful call for genuine empowerment and self-determination, rather than the illusions of progress offered by white liberalism and modern woke politics.
But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.